welcome to the Agile Coaching Exchange on this fine evening or morning or day, wherever you are in the world. We're very pleased to be joined today by a lady called Nisha Joshi. And actually, I was trying to think earlier and I could not remember where the first time I met you, Nisha. Can you remember the first time we ever met?
Yeah, it was an introduction call, a virtual coffee shortly after lockdown. Mutual friend introduced us, and then I invited you to my podcast. That's
That's it. That's it. Terrible memory. Start getting to that age. So I've known Nisha for many years now. I have been on her podcast, The Delivery Space. Definitely check it out if you're not familiar with that, but it's a great one, great speakers, and I'm sure she's always looking for people as well. And she runs that with another lady, so very prominent out there in our world and our space. But Nisha is a very talented lady. Very interested in working with leadership, coaching styles. I would say she's an agile ninja. She's been out there, she's done it, war wounds, worked in so many different organizations, some good, some bad, some ugly, I am sure. And she's currently working in Tesco's. So if you've got any complaints, make sure you send them to her and she'll obviously get it fixed on the website. But it's a real honor to have her finally come to the Agile Coaching Exchange this evening. So I'm going to hand you over. Welcome, Nisha.
thank you, Helen, for such a splendid introduction. And it's nice to have this mingling session so I can get to know those of you that have joined a little as well. When I run this session in person, I usually kick it off with some money. Now, this is only €5, but usually I have a £20 note in my hand. And I ask people to come up on stage and exchange that £20 note for £1. Now, it's the first time that I have met them. And there are some interesting dynamics that open up. Some people start thinking, what is she talking about? I don't have £1. I don't carry cash on me. Oi, Pete, over there. I recognize you. We're friends. Do you have some cash? I'll owe you later. Some don't. Some just sit back. Some don't do anything. But it reveals some interesting dynamics. For now, I'm going to keep hold of this money and we're going to use it later. But in the chat, I want you to put and enter the words, I have something to say right now. So put that in the chat, but don't click enter. Just put those words in the chat. I have something to say. You see you all whose cameras I can see doing it now. Okay, the only rule now is to press enter once you see someone else has gone first. Did you spot those few seconds of hesitation? I noticed that Helen went for it straight away. Why did you hesitate to start with? Helen, do you want to say something about that?
Why did I don't think I hesitated, but that's because I'm so competitive. I just wanted to be the first person.
You would have come up with that pound note to me on stage. I know it. I
Of course.
absolutely know it. But there was hesitation, right? There's a slight bit of hesitation I saw. Now, each one of us is making a calculation in those few moments. Is it safe? Who's going to press first? In this case, Helen went first, right? Because she wanted to get in there first. But this happens every single day, even in our workplaces, right? You talked about it, and a few of you mentioned that feeling of, feeling safe to say something, perhaps maybe filtering, perhaps hesitating because you want to frame something in the right way because you're not sure how it's going to be perceived. So there can be those things. Now back to this piece of this note. Imagine it's a £20 note from the UK. Who would want it? Type in the chat if you would want it. Me, yeah, Jamie, know it. Now, imagine if I crumpled it up like this, stepped on it, put it on the floor, stamped on it, would you still want it? Why is that? I can't believe it. The show, I crumpled up my €5 and straighten it out again. Still spends the same. It still has value. And that is a perennial thing that we all feel. Doesn't matter if you doubt the setup. It doesn't matter if you doubt anything about that environment. What you have to offer still holds value. So that psychological safety works in exactly that way. Your worth or your contribution does not vanish just because of any mistakes that you have made, any lack of worthiness that you've been made to feel, any hard conversations that you've forced yourself to have. Your worth still remains the same. But many workplaces behave like it doesn't. And if that's, there's hesitation in how we interact in those environments, there's a reason for that. So let me go to my presentation. Am I okay to share? Can you guys see it? Some time ago, when I was a Scrum Master, I was a new Scrum Master, and I had been spoiled, guys. I cannot tell you. I had a great Scrum Master to learn from. I'd been shadowing him for a good part of a year before he moved on. A great team, someone to, really, really great relationships. And the psychological safety was fantastic. We could talk to each other. We could speak to each other. We felt comfortable. I then moved jobs and thought, right, this Scrum Master thing, I've got it down pat. I've got a couple of years under my belt. I've got it. Not understanding and being relatively new, 2 years as a Scrum Master is quite new because you need a variety of exposure, right? I know that now. And then found myself in a team where it was within my first couple of months with the team. And I could tell that in the retrospectives, people did not want to speak up. The team were saying things at very surface level, and I knew there were other issues. So I spoke to my manager, because at that stage, when I was only in my early 30s, you don't really have the words for psychological safety if you don't have the awareness of it. And if you've been quite, treated to great experiences. And so I asked him and I said, I feel like people don't speak up. And his response was, well, create a Slack channel and add me to the Slack channel, and people will speak up there. Now, instinctively, I knew that was wrong. And so I worked with the team behind the scenes to build relationships one-on-one, went on a lot of coffee chats, went on a lot of walks, had a few off-site retros to try and build that relationship back up again. But it was difficult. And that Slack channel definitely wasn't the answer. So the cost of actually being exposed, why don't people usually speak up? Because when we do, and when safety is low, our brains feel it, right? Because we think, well, as you guys said, right in the mingling part of this session, if you feel like there's going to be any social rejection, your brain, your anterior cingulate cortex actually tells your system, hold on a minute, that is pain I'm experiencing. Why do you think there are so many love songs written by jilted lovers, heartbreak, unrequited love, if you like? That's because that physical pain of social rejection is felt by the body. You're doing that risk calculation as well. Is it safe? Have I got to frame this in a certain way? How is it going to be received? When I speak up, how is it going to land? Am I going to be shut down? So our brains are like running that calculation all the time. Imagine how you think I would feel if Helen said at the beginning of this, in the mingling session, Guys, what are your thoughts on psychological safety? And you all stay quiet. Like, I've got to come on and speak a lot about psychological safety, but if there was silence in the room or only a couple of you spoke up, I'd be doing that calculation myself very quickly, going, well, what's my starting point? How can I frame this? Right? It's how our brains are actually wired. So it's a natural thing. And it even comes down to history. So in the UK, does anyone recognize this chap on the right? Hey? Put
King
it in the
Henry
chat.
VIII.
Right, over on the right, yes.
Henry VIII, the subject of so many, just I love this. I love that period because it's subject of so much juicy historical fiction and stuff that goes along with it, and so many lessons. So as history goes, Henry VIII had a jester, right? And these jesters were part of the court, the royal courts, and they could speak truth to power, but that was conditioning. So his court jester in the 1500s, Will Somers, occupied this position, but once he went too far, and he made a joke about one of the queens, hopefully she was still alive, and one of his daughters, one of the princesses. And that crossed the line. And so Henry is quoted to say, I will kill him by my own hand. So you can challenge ideas as long as they're framed politely. I think one of us said this, was it Louise? So sometimes you find yourself in that type of culture, right? Where you've got to be careful how you frame it. And it's important to acknowledge that and understand that. You can raise concerns as long as you don't make them uncomfortable when they hit the ears of those that have power and authority. You can be authentic, but as long as it fits within like the boundaries of what's already acceptable. But do you think that's real safety? What do you guys think? Anyone? Go for it.
Well, I think it's a bit of a quandary, isn't it? Because we all have thoughts which we try to get out. We're trying to be really clear so that we're not misunderstood, but we're working with our brains and whatever words we can actually get out at the time. And that is not always perfect. So sometimes people have to listen to your imperfect thought, and that imperfect thought might actually trigger them because it doesn't sound, whatever it is, perfect for them to receive, I guess.
Yeah. Has anyone ever made or had that situation where you find yourself saying in a conversation, let's say, oh, do you know what? The way that came out, I didn't mean it to come out like that. What I meant was this. And immediately when you say that, the other person has to listen and is listening to effectively what you meant. So people's facial expressions can tell you, people's body language can tell you, but it's not the most comfortable of situations to be in. And when one thing, I think, again, one of you said that you guys are a wise bunch. Instilling psychological safety in an environment, encouraging it, embedding it is not an easy thing. It is going to make you feel uncomfortable. It is going to make you feel like, oh, can I say this? Or how can I create a space? Like what Jim said, how can I create a space? I need to think deeply about this without announcing it. Maybe doing some sort of a facilitation, maybe bringing people together, maybe starting off with social to make it easier. Because if that need that you spot for psychological safety happens over time, then it can result in just buried silences, and that sometimes can produce something that's even more dangerous. And that even more dangerous, hopefully this will make you giggle a little because it's awfully serious right now, is something that I came across, and that's Cassandra culture. Now, Cassandra culture, Amy Edmondson, she's the researcher and professor that talks about psychological safety, the author of the Fearless Organization. And it was Amy's work that actually brought this into my orbit. Now, Cassandra culture comes from a Greek myth, right? So Cassandra was a Trojan princess, and she was given the gift of prophecy. So Apollo took a shining to her. It all goes down with the Greek myths, I tell you. So Apollo took a shining to Cassandra and said, you shall have the gift of prophecy. By the way, want to go out for a few drinks? Cassandra then jilted him. And when she jilted him, he was like, yeah, all right, you can keep that gift, but no one will believe you. And so she warned her kingdom about the Trojan horse, and they didn't believe her. And you know what happened then. When Amy Edmondson talks about Cassandra culture, she talks about these low levels of psychological safety. She talks about those silences that perpetuate and can perpetuate over time, which is why in our world, sometimes you end up with scenarios, or I like to call them modern Cassandras, right? Where product owners can be urging the team to talk to customers, but they're sidelined because stakeholders want to follow their own agendas. Or scrum masters are like questioning roadmaps and the intention to like stick to those roadmaps without getting input from the team. Business analysts as well, always like raising concerns around metrics that potentially could be misleading, but they're told or labeled as negative. And you see that play out in real life in these examples, that some of them have made history, some of them have been awful. Has anyone seen the Netflix like film documentary on post office? Anyone seen that in the UK? It's devastating. Like, you see people that you would see every day in the village or town that you lived in that have these post offices, and they knew that the Horizon system, when it came to cashing up every night, was wrong, but their voices were completely dismissed. It was awful. I read the coverage in Private Eye over 20 years. It has been so well documented, and yet you see these mistakes. Another devastating one is the Challenger disaster with the O-ring. Like, you know, the O-ring is those rubber rings that hold together the machinery for the rocket. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this. An engineer knew that a group of engineers knew that the O-rings could fail in cold weather. They raised the alarm. They wanted the launch to be delayed, but they weren't listened to by senior managers. And that kind of thing is the thing that makes the headlines. It gives us a lot of knowledge and a lot of material and a lot of signals. That's the way I'd like to put it. Signals in our environment of things that we can look out for. So there's a lot of history and a lot of headlines that do give us that indication. Ben, did you want to add anything, my friend? I saw your comment in the chat. So what do you do? What do you design for then? I'm looking over here because my big screen is over here. So if I look over there, forgive me for a bit. But the way I've seen it done really well is that when psychological safety is designed for at both levels, at the leadership level and at the team level. Leaders can't be with teams all the time. They can set a framework for it. They can embed themselves sometimes. But if their intention to create that psychological safety isn't carried on by the teams, that's also another dynamic, if you like, that could fail. So yeah, absolutely agree with what you were saying during the mingle session. You have to design for that psychological safety at that leadership level, but it has to be perpetuated by those at the lower levels as well within those teams. These are some of, oh, not yet. I'll show you some of the things that worked for me. But McKinsey put a survey out during lockdown, and they talked about the kind of behaviors in leadership that would result in psychological safety. But even though this stuff is out there, and it's great to have this research, right? I still see leaders that display authoritative leadership and say, yeah, my way or the highway, we're doing this. And there are some times when that's okay. There's a burning building, there's health and safety considerations, fire drill is going, you need to get out. You need that authoritative leadership then, right? When it calls for some of the knowledge work that we do, this is saying to us what we instinctively already know, is that supportive leaders and consultative leaders will give you that psychologically safe environment. And only then can you provide that challenging leadership, that leader that pushes you to do your best. How many times have you, and feel free to share with me, have you come up with a case in your career so far where a leader hasn't built that relationship with you, but is pushing you to do something? And you're like, I need to know exactly where you're coming from. I need to build a relationship with you first. I need to understand what this dynamic is about. Back off a minute. How many of you have that? Near here. Oh, yeah. Any others want to share? That's fine. It's totally fine. But yeah, it's that there's that personally, what I look for is that supportive leadership, like the kind of the coach leadership who checks in every now and again and encourages you. And then the consultative leadership where you are asked for your opinion on certain things, you are listened to, and you're included in decision making. That's really important. And once you see those signals, then you can become, and you partake in that dynamic, then you're ready for someone to be able to challenge you and say, Nish, this way, perhaps not this way. I'm not sure about this decision, perhaps this way. You'll be ready to listen because that groundwork has been done in establishing that supportive and that consultative relationship. I'm ready for questions and stuff at any time, so just go for it. So Amy Edmondson's work is quite extensive. And what I love and what I subscribe to is Timothy R. Clark's work, because it breaks things down for your environment. Like, we can say psychological safety till the cows come home, but then what does it look like in our space? And how can we envisage what it looks like? He breaks it down into 4 areas. Can I be myself? And that can be taken in varying degrees. So I think, as Louise, thanks, Erin. As Louise pointed out earlier, if you're going to say something unfiltered, and if it's going to land in an awkward way, maybe you want to think about it and think about how you're going to deliver it. Learner safety. Are we safe to learn and grow here? Are we safe to make mistakes? Are we safe to experiment? Contributor safety. If I needed to take my team out in that scenario that I described to you earlier on in my career that inspired this talk, and have an offsite retro with them, would I be allowed to? That's an example. Is it safe to speak truth to power? Can I say, I do not think you've got third-party consultants here and telling us ways of working, and the team's having to subscribe to them? How about we do that ourselves? How about we figure that out ourselves? How about we go through the discomfort of doing it ourselves, make our own mistakes, and that will be a better learning curve, and we'll have more solid knowledge built in our space. How about that? So so far, let's say we've talked about the cost of low psychological safety, right? We're going to look at everyday behaviors that can build this up. These are some of the behaviors that I've seen that I've really liked seeing in environments that I've been in. So have a quick look at this list and pick one that you feel that is hardest to practice in your team. if you had to pick, which one would it be? Or write a completely new one in the chat. Just put the numbers in or write your own. Is the chat frozen? Number 2. Third versus not heard. Yeah.
Was it, sorry, Nish, was it like ones that we don't see very often?
Yeah, the ones that are either that you don't see very often, that's a good point, or the ones that you find hardest to practice in your team. Sharing your mistakes. People don't feel comfortable doing that. Yeah, absolutely. Failing as a team. So the work that we do, if one person fails, one person is not supported, we all fail. Yeah, I love that. Enzo, do you want to share how that's gone for you? If you feel comfortable, my friend.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, it depends also from the company culture. Depends also, of course, on the culture. Personally, I am Italian, but I work in Switzerland. So in Italian, for example, it's really people, they really accept the fact that people make mistakes. Sometimes we have this celebration of the worst mistake of the month. Really, it was a kind of a ritual, so everyone felt without any fear. In Switzerland, unfortunately, the culture, but even the people culture, the way the Swiss people are more, a bit more introverted, a bit more like this. So if you show your weaknesses, um, automatically the people think that that the person might not be good in a particular field. So it's much more difficult to create this psychological safety, because no one is going to speak about his mistakes. It's something that is considered too too big a secret, like bank secrecy in Switzerland.
You find when you join environments that's like one of the first things that like jumps out at you, like how quickly people can say, oh, do you know what, I messed up here, but don't do this, don't do it like I did it, or don't make the same mistake that I did, right? But I mean, like, I look for stuff like that when people share that with me. I'm like, yeah, great, thanks, heads up. And so how did you do it better when you did it again?
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that, Jose. Anyone else want to share anything about the results they put in? I was getting hopeful there. I had someone put themselves off mute.
Yeah, I mean, I love the conversation, but there's something seems to be missing to me in this, which is I do feel that a lack of psychological safety is to some people's benefit, or at least they create a lack of psychological safety. So we're coming at this from the point of view of what are the things you need to do to get psychological safety. But I feel what we're missing here is, what if there are people who like the lack of psychological safety?
Perhaps that's a whole talk in itself. Immediately, Barnaby, I think that's a really, what you just said that makes it makes me feel uncomfortable, because it makes me think, oh, hold on a minute. What could be the thinking behind creating that kind of space? And why is that space created in the first place? It's such an interesting angle.
I mean, I worked for one organization where they used to have all hands meetings where people could ask questions, and there were very rarely questions asked. So one time they said, well, what we'll do is we'll have anonymous questions. And they only did it once, and they never did it again, because they got a whole series of really tough questions. And they said, no, this was a bad idea. We'll not be doing that again. From now on, it'll be, you'll have to put your hand up and speak.
Oh, but what an opportunity lost, Barnaby.
I think to some extent they didn't want to have to answer those questions. So for them, it was putting them in a tough place that they didn't want to be in.
Yeah, yeah. There is so much to say. I love that idea. Barnaby, I think you should develop a talk on that theme. Someone else put their hand up, or was that a reaction? Sorry. I can never tell. And we're not doing that again. Yeah, yeah. There could be many reasons around that. Ben, did you put yourself as mute? Do you want to say something? No, okay. Ben. Yeah, thanks, Barnaby. I shall look out for your talk, my friend, because that's a really interesting angle.
I've kind of lived it. I think I would not sure I want to go through the pain of talking about it in detail.
That is so interesting. Okay. All right. I shall stop trying to encourage you to get on stage somewhere and put it out there.
I'm grateful for the encouragement. Thank you.
No, not at all. That would be fantastic. So yeah, I think it's impossible to get it right all the time. And you have to be so cognizant of your environment and be very, very good at making a scan over where you are to understand where that space is sitting in terms of psychological safety. Geeta.
Thank you. I wanted to share a small experience of related to the point that Barnaby raised of what if people did not want to have psychological safety? You try anonymous once, and then you get a whole load of stuff, and we're not doing it again. I was working with the leader once who genuinely wanted to create an open space, and in order to let people feel comfortable, this person allowed an anonymous entry of that the first time because they were experimenting with the whole psychological safety concept. And they got all sorts of comments. And then in a coaching session, they said, what do I do with this? And then I invited them to go again into the space and engage with the people again and to invite, okay, so whoever has raised a problem, can I invite you to share a suggested solution? Stay anonymous one more time. And then it was misused quite badly, where this leader was, somebody made a very sharp comment on the leader, and the leader said, I hear you, and I'm open to listen to help me understand what this means, because that comment in itself was quite sharp. And so I think anonymity, I have found with an organization, sometimes it can backfire depending on the intent and the mindset of those who are participating in as well. Sometimes it's not all about the leaders or those who are trying to process what's being said. It's something happens in that space where you have to be able to take accountability for what you say.
That's such a good point. Yeah. Makes me think, has anyone, the culture map, yeah, is sitting right there on my table. I love that book with loads of examples. Completely recommended. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it is really, really tough. Has anyone walked away from an organization, a gig, a permie role, where they've made a scan of the culture and said, this doesn't align with my values?
Yeah, I mean, I always remember the gigs that went terrible, but there was one that I worked with many years ago now, and they were just like trying to get me to project manage and micromanage people, and the environment was just absolutely terrible. And in the end, it was just affecting how I thought and how I felt about myself, and made me start to question like about what's my identity as an agile coach. And so in the end, I just had to say to Colin, who's like the owner of the company, I just had to say, I can't work here anymore. And I guess I was lucky that I had the opportunity to, as a consultant, just to leave them, but I just couldn't be there because it was just a toxic place to be.
Thanks for sharing that, Helen. Was there a final thing that happened that made you think, you know what, this is not for me?
Yeah, I was asked to project manage a project that was going to die. I'm not a project manager.
No.
Yeah, I think it's difficult as well because sometimes you buy into what the company is about, but where you are in that company is not great. So, and that's always very difficult. Because I've worked for companies where you listen to what the purpose is and you can get on board with that. You listen to what the senior leaders say and you can get on board with that. But then the way that things are actually operating in your team or your department just make you want to run and hide. So, and you have a choice, you know, and like Helen did, I left. I went to somewhere else in the company, which wasn't, you know, which was a bit better, but not great. So eventually I left the company, but it is difficult when part of you buys into some of the things that you think should happen and are okay and are good things to do.
It takes a toll emotionally, doesn't it? You have to really sit with yourself and go, how much am I going to invest in this in an emotional sense? Because you do, where you work, I mean, you can't get away from that. You do invest in the people around you. You do invest in the whole team ethos. You do invest in it. Because you do have to ask yourself that question. It's like Chris says, yeah, it can actually burn you out over time when you come up against this in your environment. It's something to be aware of. It's a very personal choice. Thank you for sharing those.
I think I read once that one of the prime causes of stress is not being able to be open and honest about the situation. So effectively, by being silenced, you create a huge stress feedback for yourself.
I felt it during the call, Barnaby, when you said, hold on a minute, Nish, are you considering environments where people intentionally don't want psychological safety?
Sorry, that wasn't my intention at all.
No, not at all. But I did feel that straight away. I was like, wait a minute, I don't want to be in a space like that. And why would they want to do that? So immediately your insights tell you, your mind, wherever your decision making exists within, you know, inside you, you're saying whether your values actually could match with that or not. You know, it's important to know and understand that reaction. We've got another comment from Gita. Some people I have coached. Oh, where is that? People I have coached have walked away from all that did not match their values. Yeah. Yeah. My auntie used to work for Twitter in San Francisco. And then as soon as the new leadership that we all see in the mainstream media took over, she walked out too. I want to end on an uplifting, bit more of an uplifting story, and introduce you to my folks, Mr. and Mrs. Moder. God love them, I love them. And my mum and dad, right? They're not the typical couple that will sit across a candlelit table in a restaurant and talk over their problems or the you know, any like clashes they're having in their relationship. And this is what I remember from my childhood that I always keep front and center, because leadership and psychological safety, I've got a lot of lessons from my parents in, right? So here they are in their on their holiday in Crete, sending us pictures, me and my sister, whilst we're working, and making us extremely jealous. But I keep this with me. So they're like the classic introvert extrovert couple, Mr. and Mrs. Moder. And if like my mum was here today, and if we were in a venue, she'd be around speaking to all of you, getting to know your names, having a conversation with you, understanding a bit more about you. Whereas my dad would be stood at one of those high tables, glancing at the buffet, thinking, oh, you know, if someone comes to speak to me, great. But if they don't, I'm fine just hanging out by myself. It's a classic introvert, extrovert people. That's them. When I was growing up, they were always remodeling, redecorating our house and helping friends with theirs. And this was the most that I would hear them argue when they were talking about refurbing. My mum would be like, well, can we just make a decision on this? My dad would be like, well, have you seen how many taps there are? Right? It would be that type of thing. And those are the things where that would cause the most friction in the house. Now, they had a habit where they would walk a lot during the day. They would go out for walks as a couple. We remember that a lot. And they would come back after an hour or so and they'd talk things through. They would walk and talk. And then after a few years, and especially when this refurbing like grew in scale, my dad went and got a job as a contractor for Kodak. And that meant shift work. That meant only one day free in the week for my dad. And that was Saturdays. And of course, because he wasn't around, they couldn't do the walks. The arguing sort of like escalated, and they were like, oh, we're not getting enough time to talk to each other. We're not getting through our projects. My dad, what he did was he remembered what worked for them to feel safe, to feel heard, to feel a bit more in sync. And he brought those walks back on the Saturday. And that led to them being a lot more decisive about what they wanted to do, a lot more and able to communicate. So we brought that back so that those walks turned into more of a ritual where they could talk things through, make decisions about me and my sister and our education, about their refurb projects and things like that. So I've learned a lot from that, and a lot of practice has come from seeing how they've actually worked together and chosen to communicate as a couple. If psychological safety that we've talked about together today is the strongest predictor for high performance in a team, high performance in a family, high performance in a marriage and in a community, then I would leave you with one question. Are you yourself a safe space? Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Nisha. Let's give her a round of applause. Round of applause. What questions have we got? Any thoughts, observations, anything at all that you'd like to share?
There's got to be something. Our chat has been really rich up till now.
Just on that last point, I think you make a really good point about that when teams and organizations are very busy and facing really tough deadlines, that maybe they stop having those walks or the equivalents of those walks. So psychological safety becomes a victim of how busy they are.
It does. It definitely does. It's something that you need to prioritize, especially then, right? Because in that busyness, you could say something you don't mean, you could lash out and it could be taken the wrong way, and it's never meant to be taken the wrong way. Yeah. It's nice. It brings back that balance.
Yeah, but if you've got trust, you know, like you've got that psychological safety, and like maybe somebody says something or you say something that ain't great, then the other person will feel safe to say, oh, what was that about?
Yeah, but you need time for that, don't you, Louise? That kind of stuff doesn't happen straight away. Often.
No, you have to know somebody really, really well. You have to work together. You have to see where you've been successful together, you know, and then gotten into your rhythm.
Yeah.
Because the best working relationship I ever had was with somebody who I spoke to 2 to 3 hours a day, every day, pretty much. And that was on the phone before we had video.
That was brilliant. I remember those lengthy conversations definitely before we had video. Anyone else want to say anything?
Yeah, go on then. If I look insane, it's because you're on the big telly and the laptop's on the couch next to me.
Hey,
So I'm like, kind of thing. But no, right. So maybe a counter example. Yeah. Just happened. It happens all the time, but it just happened is when there's a lot of blame to go around for a miss. And that just happened to a team that I'm going to be managing. Well, I'm product owner, so I'm going to be product owner for over the next few months, just taking over, doing knowledge transfer stuff and things like that. But what happened was there's a big miss, and all of a sudden everyone's at each other's throats because the rest of the business are going, who messed this up? You know, caught myself then with the, but it's poison, you know, because now having gone through that kind of blame storming sort of exercise, it's made people even less likely to be open, more likely to cover themselves, you know, and it's a hard road back from that, really. It's happened in a few places. Often it's pressure from sales, or it's just that, you know, somebody's looking for somebody to hang things on. And I think partly Scrum Master and PO or whatever in combination or something like that, sometimes it's the same role. I've just got to be the sort of bulwark, you know. I always kind of picture myself as like the wall around the castle, and inside's all the talent, design, and engineering and stuff. And you just have to protect them from everybody else. And I'm, you know, old and fat. I can do that, so it's fine. But I think when you're taking the flak, it leaves them free to sort of, you know, nurture that kind of safe space. Sort of thing. At least that's what what I've tried to actively do to do it. And certainly the team that I'll end up managing soon, I'd be lucky enough to manage him, doesn't have that, and it's absolutely apparent exactly what the downside is. So yeah, there you go. Anyway, that's my.
Thanks for sharing. How do you look after yourself in that process?
Oh, I don't. I regularly burn out, turn to drink, crash, end up on the dole, have to get another job. So yeah, it really doesn't go that well when you're trying to soak up far too much. But I think I've been through it enough times that I spot the warning signs in advance now. And the sort of the lead from the front, you know, cover everyone for them. It's quite costly, actually. So yeah, I think the walking away thing is something I never managed before, but I would do in what few years remain to me.
Good. I'm glad to hear it, man. Yeah, important pressures. Thank you so much for sharing that, Chris.
You're welcome.
Can I share a final insight with you as well? Something I've learned, because I've worked with a lot of software engineers over the years, and it took me a while to work something out with software engineers. And that is, if you're in a meeting with a software engineering team and they agree with what you're saying, they would tell you something. They will actually speak up and they'll say, I agree with what you're saying. If you're in a meeting with software engineers and they have neutral expressions and they say nothing, they disagree with you, they don't feel they have the psychological safety to say anything. So a lesson I've learned over the years is if you're in a room, there's a whole bunch of people with a very neutral expression who are saying nothing, they don't agree with you, but they don't think they can say it.
I love that. I love that so much. I think you should have the final word on it, Barnaby.